top of the hour. I'm sure some folks will be joining us, but welcome to this training that we're really honored to host. I am Eleanor Hancock. I'm the director of White Awake, and we're hosting a training with Lyla June on forging alliances between settler and indigenous people. Before we get started, I'm going to turn this over to Jo Del Amor, who is providing tech support with use of Zoom, and she's going to walk you through the platform and provide some pointers.
Great, thanks Eleanor. Hi, I'm Jo, and we are on Zoom. So I want to give you just a little orientation to your screen. I've posted in the chat a couple of pointers that I'm going to walk through. So on the bottom of your screen, you should have a menu there that has on the bottom left a microphone. That's the place where you can mute and unmute yourself. We ask you to stay muted for the majority of the call, like when we're listening to Lyla, when we're listening to a presenter, just to avoid background noise. But when we're invited to share, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak to the group. So we just want to be intentional about that, make sure there's not unintentional background noise. Then next to that, there's a video, like a camera, and it says stop video or start video. And that's where you can show your video or hide your video. So that's up to you when and how you want to do that. When we go into a breakout room with a small group of people, it's nice to have your video on so you can communicate together. If you go over to the right, there's a little speech bubble that says chat, and that will open up your chat window. Now we can use the chat during the call to share what we need to share with each other, and we just ask you to be kind of mindful that when there's a presentation going on that we're paying attention to the presentation, but we can have that there for sharing with each other, or asking for support is the other thing. You can actually chat directly to me if you're having a technical issue and you need a little tech support. Then over in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a little Rubik's Cube kind of thing with a bunch of little squares, and that's where you can change your view, where you either have speaker view or gallery view. Gallery view is where you can see all the little videos all next to each other, and speaker view is where the one person who's speaking is big in the middle of your screen. So that's up to you if you want to see everybody or if you want to be able to track the speaker a little bit more clearly. Sometimes it's helpful to have speaker view. Great, so that is it. Oh yes, and Kenley is sharing that if you're on full screen, the choices that I'm reviewing might be hidden at the top or the bottom of your screen. Thanks, Kenley. Okay, there you go, Eleanor.
Great, yeah, and one more tech note I'll add is that for folks who join on the phone, I'm not looking now, but we usually have a few people. When you want to, you are muted because we mute everybody when you come in, but if you want to speak into the group, you unmute yourself by pushing *6. And we will repeat that before your breakout rooms because you'll definitely want to be unmuted if you're going to participate in a small group discussion. So I will just take a couple minutes here to talk a little bit about my introduction to Lyla's work and my getting to know her a little bit as a colleague. And I was first acquainted with her work when my colleague David Dean forwarded me a link to her video, All Nations Rise. And that was through a Facebook post. And Lyla wrote something that accompanied the video. She wrote about witch burnings and how the indigenous peoples of Europe were some of the first to be colonized and harmed a long time ago. And this was something that I had been developing my own understanding of for years. It's something that we teach through White Awake offerings, but to have this validated and named by a Native woman from Turtle Island or North America was a really powerful experience for me. And I was really excited about connecting folks who interact with White Awake with Lyla to receive that, directly if they didn't happen to come across this video and this Facebook post. When I watched the video, All Nations Rise, and Lyla's calling on indigenous people to rise because of what she wrote, I felt included in that call. That I was also a child of Earth, and I was also here to rise up on behalf of life. So after this, I reached out to Lyla to see if maybe she had some material that we could share on our site. And she shared with me the essay that has since been republished in Moon magazine as well. And that's how I learned, we have it posted as The Vast and Beautiful World of Indigenous Europe on our site. But that's how I learned Lyla's story about connecting spiritually with her own Indigenous European ancestors. And again, her journey in that way has been really inspiring and healing for me. So working with Lyla to host this training, I can say that she is as gracious, accessible, straightforward, and loving in person as she is in her videos and in her other work. So without further ado, I will turn the mic over to Lyla.
Awesome, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Also, Eleanor, some folks say they're waiting for approval. They texted me, so I don't know if there's any way you can approve them.
Sure.
All right, so I'll just introduce myself to start out and say that I'm really happy to have you guys here and to be doing this. And also say that my family just happened to want to walk, like 5 of them want to walk into the house right when the training started. So if you hear them in the background, they're just doing that. So yaat e shik e aro shidine she e nanisht ejit kachini nishlindo haska idine e bashishti ashi hedushiche delagana e dashinale Taos, New Mexico, do Durango, Colorado, do Phoenix, do Flagstaff, de Nasha, Alabama, Chevron. My name's Lyla June. I'm of the Black Charcoal Streak Division of the Red Running Into Water people of the Dene Nation. That's my first clan. And sorry, one second. Let me ask them if they could be a little quiet. They're so cute. They have perfect timing. I'm of, also on my dad's side, I'm of Cheyenne clan. And my third clan is the Ashihe clan, the Salt clan of the Dene Nation. And my fourth clan is kind of unknown. We don't know what my dad's dad is exactly. We know he's a mixture of Native and European from Texas. But I just say my fourth clan is Scandinavian and Scottish because that's one of the lineages I also try to honor. And I actually prepared some notes for today because I'm actually so prepared. So I'm gonna, I just sent something to the chat. It's a Google document. And I hope you all can open it. If you cannot, that's okay. I will be narrating it as we go through. For those of you who are driving or on, you know, in a loud cafe or I don't know, for some reason can't open it, we'll narrate it the best we can. But this is sort of my outline of what we're gonna do today. So let me deepen my introduction and then I'll give us all a chance to introduce each other. So as I said, my name is Lyla June Johnston. I'm of Dene and Cheyenne ancestry. My father is also part Scottish and Scandinavian. I grew up in Taos, New Mexico, Durango, Colorado, Flagstaff, Arizona, and Phoenix, Arizona. We moved around a lot. I then attended Stanford University for my undergraduate studies and graduated with honors and distinction in anthropology with an environmental focus. Since then, I've been spending the past 8 years trying to unlearn everything they taught me at Stanford because it turned out to be a very colonial curriculum and very indoctrinating into the Western way of knowing, Western way of seeing the world. So I kind of got disillusioned by Stanford and I went to University of New Mexico to study American Indian education, where I got to work under Dr. Greg Cajete, who's the author of Native Science, Look to the Mountain, Igniting the Sparkle, and a lot of other really epic books about indigenizing education for Native youth. My thesis there focused on community curriculum development, where I got to work with 100 Dene people to create our own summer school. I'm currently at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where I'm working with Alaska Native elders to devise a traditional foods experiment. My long-term goal is to change the way the world thinks about food and water by revitalizing our traditional food systems. I'm also a touring musician, public speaker. I gave a few links to some music videos, some of which are good and some of which are just okay. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I started doing drugs at age 11, as is common with many Indigenous peoples living in the shadow of colonialism. I'm a veteran of spiritual, emotional, and sexual abuse. That's actually a big part of my work, and what I do is trying to help people recover from sexual abuse and other gendered violences. I use these life experiences to try and help people going through the same thing. I'm an ex-militant, as I was raised to be, very confrontational, very burn the man down type of stuff. And when I was 16, I met Desmond Tutu. He's a leader of Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa. And he talked about this thing called forgiveness. And I started to see things a little differently. I'm a believer in forgiveness, restorative justice, nonviolence, and firm believer in creator and the sacred. So that might set me apart from other Indigenous peoples who might not see things the way I see them. So I'm just going to put that out there. My biggest passion, however, is just to honor creator with every step I take and get closer to the Diandine, which are the holy people, which are the good spirits and the ones who guide us and support us. So that's sort of my background, just to set me in context. I want to do a little disclaimer about this training. I think this is a highly contentious subject. I've had people, both Native and European American, kind of get after me for doing this training. So it's like I can't win on either side. But I do know that I'm trying to help. And I do know I'm trying to do something good. And I don't have all the answers. I just have my life experiences. I do not represent the viewpoints of all Indigenous peoples. However, I think I definitely have my hand on the pulse of what Indigenous communities are going through. And I definitely know that I definitely share the viewpoints of a lot of Indigenous peoples. So, but I do know I'm going to do my very best to honor my ancestors and give you as much help as I can today in the spirit of unity and healing. So at this point, we're going to break out into groups. Good luck navigating the tech of this Zoom call. And I'd like you to introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, and why you wanted to take this training, just so that we can get to know each other a little bit. And we'll do that for about 5 minutes. So try and keep it a little brief. I'm sorry for the briefness, but we just have a lot to cover today. So go ahead and break out and take 5 minutes to do that. And we'll come back around maybe 2:20 Mountain Time, 3:20 Central. No, however that works. Oh yeah, 2:20 Central, 3:20 Eastern, 1:20 Mountain, and 12:20 Pacific. So we'll reconvene at that point. And thank you all so much for being here. I'm really happy that we're doing this, and I've never done this before. It's an experiment, so we'll see where it goes. And I hope that all of us are inspired to do similar work wherever we're from. So have a good time getting to know each other, and I'll be back on here in a little bit.
Thanks.
So thanks everyone for trying to get to know each other in that short time. I know it's very short. I hope that this could be a place where we could actually weave networks and weave friendships and kinship that we could use beyond this training. And for those of you who are in cafes and driving and just aren't able to introduce yourself, it's okay. We just thank you for being on and for listening. All right, so let me get into the meat of our training now. The main mantra for today is, in what way, if at all, can I help? This is what I've heard from many Indigenous people around Turtle Island, around the world, what they wish not just European descendants would say to them, but also just what anyone who's not from their community would say to them is, in what way, if at all, can I help? So the main topic today is how to be in service to Indigenous people's visions, and how to not accidentally fall into the quote unquote savior faux pas. And I know a lot of you have heard about this before, so I apologize if you've already kind of come to understand this, but I think we'll get to know it in great detail and depth today. And I'm just going to assume that we're building up from the ground upward, and that I'm just going to assume that we're working with people who are very fresh to this whole world and need that kind of help. And so the reason why we say, in what way, if at all, can I help, is because we want to be in service to Indigenous people's ideas. For too many centuries, people have come into our communities and told us what to do, told us how to live, told us that we are savage, primitive, backward, stupid. And so that's why it hurts a lot when people say, you know, hey, I have this great idea and I want to give it to your Native community, even with the best intentions. That's usually somewhat offensive, and not the breakaway from colonization that we're hoping to do. Because when we come in with a pre-packaged idea that we want to use to help Indigenous peoples, even though it's maybe a very brilliant idea, and even though it may work in your community, it's still not reversing that legacy of Native people not being allowed to choose where they want to go, how they want to get there. So what I'm hoping to do in this training is to teach all of us how to bring all of our resources, all of our things we have to offer, and kind of funnel it in service to whatever Indigenous leaders are trying to do on the ground. So anyways, we'll get into that. I wanted to give you all a few examples of Indigenous efforts that I think are particularly inspiring. So just to kind of give you a first insight into the Indigenous world. Again, I have no idea what level people are at here or how much exposure they've had to Indigenous causes, but I think these are some really interesting ones. So the first link there under the heading, some examples of Indigenous efforts. The first one I want to examine is the Shumi land tax, which I find to be very just innovative and brilliant. It's a Bay Area program, San Francisco area program, where non-Indian residents, non-Indigenous residents, just broke my own rule of saying Indigenous instead of Indian, non-Indigenous residents pay an affordable yearly voluntary tax to the Indigenous nation for being able to live on their lands. So let's go ahead and open up that link. It says https://segoritelandtrust.com/Shumi land tax. You can either open it up, or Joe, if you want to share my screen, that works too, and you can just watch my screen, and you can see what I'm seeing. Should we do it that way, Joe? Are you in control of that, or am I?
You are actually in control of that.
Oh.
So on the bottom of your screen, you can press share, and it will just bring up what's on your computer there.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So if you're looking at it, you see a beautiful heading where it has the city of Oakland. the bay, the coastal range, and then in front of it, it has a Ohlone roundhouse and some oak trees, which are part of the efforts of the Ohlone people to build a roundhouse and reestablish indigenous structures in the East Bay. So if you look at this, it says Shumi land tax, the land you live on. Do you live in Oakland, Berkeley, Pleasanton, Fremont, Walnut Creek? And it lists all these cities. Uh-oh. Shoot. See what happened there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can still hear you. Did your share went away?
Huh.
Maybe
Okay.
just click it again.
Okay,
We can
will
try that.
do. Sorry. Okay.
There you go.
If the answer is yes, you live on traditional Chochenyo and Karkin Ohlone land. This land has a deep history and a community of people who have lived here for thousands of years, actually hundreds of thousands of years. For those of us who are not indigenous to this land, the Shumi land tax is a way to acknowledge the history and the Ohlone community. And then they go into how you can calculate your annual Shumi land tax. If you scroll down a little bit, it says, what is your relationship to Ohlone land? You could say, I rent property, I own property, or I rent commercial property. And then you say that, and then somehow, I don't know exactly how, but they come up with a very affordable percentage of your, I think it's your yearly land property tax. In any case, I think it comes out to about $50 a year or something. It's very affordable depending on how big your house is, but it's probably for someone like me, it'd be like $50 a year. And so they have a lot of people in the Bay Area buying into this, and it's completely voluntary. So nobody has to pay this tax, obviously. I'm sure the Ohlone kind of wish they could enforce it, but they don't have the political power yet to do so. So anyone can pay this tax. And all of this money goes into, let's see, really cool projects that they're doing. See if I could find some. Sorry, one second. Our vision. The Scorate Land Trust is an urban, indigenous, woman-led community organization that facilitates the return of Chochenyo and Karkin Ohlone lands to indigenous stewardship. I know that they have, like I said, the Roundhouse Project, where they're building the roundhouse and also reestablishing the ecology of the area, reestablishing the indigenous species in the area. And also, I know that they're working on restoring a certain kind of trout to the rivers in Oakland, which is a huge undertaking given the destruction of those waterways. So that's one example. Just to give you guys some inspiration of what indigenous peoples are working on these days. So let's go to the second one. Wichoni Wawokya Incorporated. This is a woman that I met when I was doing work in South Dakota to help the Black Hills. She's a beautiful woman, and she runs a safe house for veterans of human trafficking in South Dakota and North Dakota. The human trafficking industry is really alive and well in that area, and she creates, it's basically, she got a hotel and actually remodeled it and turned it into a place where veterans of human trafficking can come and heal. Wichoni in Lakota means life and health. So she brings that to the women. This is a feature on her, if you're looking at the screen, by the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. Her website got shut down So there's an example of a way we could help is, help her with a website. If any of you guys are web designers out there, or even if you know how to make a Wix site, who knows, I'm sure she'd be grateful for someone to manage that. But she doesn't even have her website. So that's why I'm going through the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center website to give you an example of what she does. She's absolutely stunning. She works in Crow Creek and Lower Brule Reservation, some of the poorest counties in the country. She's the epitome of resilience. She's just one of my heroes, my sheroes. So Lisa Heth, Choni Wawokia Incorporated. All right, let's see some other ones. The Karis Children's Learning Center is a full immersion school that's working to save the Karis language. Karis is a, oops, messed up here. There we go. Karis is a dialect that is spoken in New Mexico by the Southern Pueblos. If you know New Mexico very well, there's a river that runs right through it, which is the Rio Grande River. And there's, I want to say over a dozen indigenous communities living along this river, all the way down to El Paso area, that are part of like the Pueblo society. Beautiful people, very special people. There used to be hundreds of Pueblos. Now there's like 12 or 18, I forget what the number is, but it's in the teens. These people have been nearly annihilated. So this language, the Karis language, is in danger of being extinguished due to the invasion of English in our lives. So the Karis Children's Learning Center actually teaches Karis to children in a full immersion learning approach. So that means the moment these kids walk in the door, they are learning Karis, and they're only hearing Karis all day. So it's like English is prohibited in this building. So immersion is usually the only tactic that actually works to revitalize indigenous languages. The fearless leader is this woman here, if you're looking at the screen share in the About Us tab. Her name's Trisha Mokino. She's pretty epic. She's just absolutely beautiful. And her vision was to create a school where her children could learn the language, because she was a public school teacher. She went to Stanford like I did, and also got her master's at UNM like I did. And she wrote her master's on blending the Montessori method with indigenous language revitalization. And she was in the public schools, and she's like, why are my elders teaching me to keep our culture alive? But then when I go in the public schools, they're teaching me to perform on these PARCC tests and all these standardized tests. And she said, I'm just going to make my own school. So she did. And I love that kind of initiative. And it's the kind of initiative you're going to find all throughout indigenous communities. There's just brilliant, resilient, mind-blowing people out there doing incredible work that I'm trying to propose that we get behind them. You'll see here, there's a European American woman, Mara Matson. She's a friend of mine too. And she's kind of doing the work that I'm kind of encouraging us to do on this call, which is she's non-native, but she has these skills. She has organizing skills, business skills, but she doesn't push it on Trisha. She just says, Trisha, how can I help? And Trisha says, here's what I need you to do. And that way, the vision remains indigenous led. So again, I know a lot of you already heard of this concept of just following the lead of the community you're trying to serve. But I know, at least for me, I didn't really know that, believe it or not, as an indigenous person. I didn't have that kind of sensitivity. So I'm really appreciative people taught me that, because now I'm just a lot better ally. And I know people like to use the word accomplice, but sometimes accomplice makes me feel like I'm a henchman or something, like I'm like, I don't know. Accomplice has an interesting connotation to it. So maybe I'm trying to find something between ally and accomplice, because either one don't quite seem to be what I'm espousing. But anyways, okay. So the fourth, oops, I forgot to get the link. Let me see if I can get them. The fourth one I wanted to show you is the Ramapo Lenape in New Jersey. This is a New York Times article entitled "The Ramapos versus the World." And the subheadline is, "Will an oil pipeline proposed for tribal lands destroy the Ramapo Lenape Nation along the New Jersey and New York border? Or will it be a catalyst that once again unites the tribe?" So the Split Rock Sweetwater Prayer Camp was born during the Standing Rock movement, which was a fight to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota, where thousands of people were on the ground to stop the pipeline, and probably millions of people around the world were doing what they could to support them. It's led by Chief Perry, this guy right here, if you're looking at my screen share, looking real cool. He's a wonderful man. He's Ramapo Lenape. This is a small tribe in New Jersey. And I think this one's also interesting because I think for those of us who live in urban areas, we're kind of like New York. We think, oh, well, all the indigenous peoples are gone. That's too bad. I would help them, but they're extinct. But actually, they're usually still there. Even in highly urbanized places like Manhattan, the indigenous people still live there. Their descendants still exist, and they still have dreams, and they still have needs. And they're always the ones at the bottom of the ladder, or whatever you call it. So I like Chief Perry because he's a leader of a very tiny, tiny, tiny little tribe. A lot of this tribe are mixtures of African Americans and Lenape, which I also like because a lot of our indigenous brothers and sisters are mixed. You have to keep in mind that about 98% of our villages were wiped out to disease. That leaves 2% of the gene pool. So sometimes you got to intermarry just to keep going. And a lot of us intermarried with African American and European American peoples. And those are the descendants of that nation. And so Chief Perry's a wonderful man. And you can read this article. It's a little old. It's from 2017. But it's to give you insight into some of the resistance / prayer camps that started popping up, kind of inspired by Standing Rock. But let's see, stop share. So those are examples of, where am I? Here I am. Just to give you insight into the really cool stuff that's going on in Native communities. And I like to do that. That's what Dr. Kehete taught me to do, because he taught me how to be a teacher. And he said a good way to start is just to inspire people right off the bat and give them an insight into a world. And then you can start getting into more principles and best practices and things like that. So now that hopefully we're a little inspired, I'll get into sort of the main point. Like I said, the mantra for today is, in what way, if at all, can I help? So I envision all of you, let's see how many, there's 106 of us on this call, which is great. I imagine all 106 of you going home after this training, looking up who's the indigenous nation, that you're living on, that you're a guest to, and maybe seeing some of the projects they have going on. Maybe there's a protest going on about gosh, there's no shortage of things that Native people are protesting at any given moment, because we're being attacked from every side all the time. And just attending, or maybe it's a movie screening, or maybe it's even a powwow, maybe it's a salmon bake. You know, in the Northwest, they have their salmon bakes. And just showing up humbly, and maybe once the event is over and everyone's packing up, you know, you could just say, in what, you know, you could try and find the leader, who's usually, not always, but usually is a woman, and say, you know, in what way, if at all, can I help? And she might say something you were never expecting. She might say, you might think she wants to do a permaculture project, but it turns out that all of the women in her family, in her tribe, I mean, don't have money for diapers. You know, you never know. And maybe diapers isn't as glorious of a way to help as you were expecting, but hey, that's the directive of the leaders. So even though it's not what you would do, or maybe not what you think is most important, or not what you think is the right issue to focus on, just being in service to what they need is a form of healing, because you're breaking away from a legacy of paternalism that America has inflicted on Native communities since the inception of this imaginary nation state. So just by saying, in what way, if any, can I help, you're already doing healing. You're already changing the way Indigenous peoples and European Americans interact. You're already doing something revolutionary, because you're humbling yourself to whatever visions they have. So this training actually isn't that complicated. And I can't say, oh, here's what you all got to do. You all got to do this, you know, because then that's me saying, oh, all Indigenous communities need this, you know. Actually, each and every community has their own unique issues that Lyla has no idea about. I mean, I have a good idea of a lot of them, but not all of them. And that there's no one size fits all answer to this training, except for that our task as allies and accomplices and people who give a crap, you know, is to say, in what way, if any, can I help? And then see what they say and rally behind it. Okay, so examples of how and how not to help. If you're looking at my little sheet here, it looks like 70 of us are, which means 30 some odd of us are not. And to those of you who aren't looking at the sheet, let us know if we can help you look at the sheet, or I'll just do my best to narrate.
How do you find the sheet?
Oh, sorry. I sent it out in the chat, but let me send it to you again.
I'll
Oops,
find
that's
it
the wrong.
for you and repost it.
That's the wrong link. Don't do that one. Here, I'll do it again.
Okay.
Bam, there it is. Sorry if you didn't know where the sheet was. It's a Google Doc. Okay. That's sort of the thing I wrote up for this. And we're down at the headline that says, avoiding the savior faux pas.
Lyla, do you mind
Yeah.
using your screen share for that?
Oh, good idea. Yeah, let's do it. Maybe I should just screen share the whole time. Okay. Okay. So here we are, avoiding the savior faux pas. Instead of saying, oh, I know all about this thing and that's what this community needs because I'm so advanced and I'm so Western and I have technology and these poor Native Americans are so primitive and da-da-da that I know what they need. That's what we're trying to not do. We're trying to go in humbly and say, in what way, if at all, can I help? That's our mantra. Okay. So what I said here was, what we do want to do is have European American support fitting into Native visions. For example, we have this thing that I'm highlighting here called Nihigal Ve'ina, which means our journey for existence. This happened 4 years ago. About 200 Dene youth walked about 1,400 miles in prayer for their homeland to protect it from a fracking boom. This is an example of an indigenous-led project that we can get behind. And I have a YouTube video there that talks about their movement, and it was the first video they put out. And if you want to watch it on your downtime, please feel free. So that's an example of, even just that YouTube video is an example of a filmmaker who's really good at making films, but is also completely willing to be directed by the indigenous peoples who are doing the movement, created a film for them. And that film helped them raise quite a few thousands of dollars to support their prayer walk, which lasted a year. And they walked 1,400 miles to each of our sacred mountains. So that's an example of what we want to do. Is, for instance, a filmmaker saying, okay, let me help you raise this money. I know how crowdfunding campaigns work. I know how video work. But again, it's an offering, and you're willing, if they say, no, we don't want that, you're like, okay, how else can I help, you know? And so what we don't want, an example of what I'm not talking about, for example, is Native people fitting into European American people's vision. For example, conferences organized by European Americans featuring Native voices, which is kind of ironic because I do a lot of those. There's a lot of conferences around the country, and they're like, oh, Lyla, can you speak? And I'm like, yeah, because I think these are constructive and helpful for networking and getting a new narrative out to the attendance of that conference. But it's not really like the deep solidarity work that I'm trying to talk about today. It's still getting Native people to serve, and it runs the risk of tokenizing indigenous peoples to serve someone else's big idea, usually European Americans' big idea. Like there's lots of examples I could give. There was this festival in Australia that I was invited to, ran by an Israeli guy who converted to Hinduism and was very spiritual, and he wanted me to perform music. So I said, okay, this is kind of why I'm still learning. I'm still like learning as a musician and learning as a indigenous person, you know, the risks that you run in being a speaker. And it was pretty sad because all the indigenous peoples were kind of just like decorations in this larger concert that was kind of all about his vision and stuff. So again, I'm glad that I went. I'm glad that I got to open some people's minds, but it's not necessarily like what I prioritize my time doing. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there just for a second because I know I've been talking for almost an hour now, and we have lots of people on this call. We have 110 people, so we can't all talk. I'm so sorry, but we're gonna pick at random, maybe 2 or 3 people, just to give, if you have comments, questions, or just reflections of what we've talked about so far. So I think there's a feature, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, where you can raise your hand.
There is. Do we want to use that?
I think so, because
Okay,
not
so
everyone wants to comment.
yeah, if you want to speak, then go down to your bottom menu there. You'll see participants, and you can click on that and it will open up a side window above your chat. And in there, you should see an option to raise hand. It's a little hand icon, and you can click on it, and then I'll be able to see it. And Lyla, I think you'll be able to see it too. So if anybody would like to share, is there a specific question you want to ask them to comment on?
Just anything, you know. I just want to open up for discussion just on what I'm saying. Just anything really, and you don't have to. If no one wants to, that's fine. I'm going to open it up a couple more times throughout the call.
Oh, we've got we had somebody
Molly,
real quick.
Molly Brown.
Molly's here. Okay, I'm unmuting you, Molly. I think.
Oh, she went away.
Oh.
Where'd you go?
Molly, if you want to share, you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
I am speaking. I just wanted to share that here in Mount Shasta, or the region of Mount Shasta, there is a native project that is the Winnemem Wintu are doing, which is called, I'm blanking on it, something about the salmon, bring back the salmon.
The salmon run.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just an example, and I haven't actually gone out and tried to support it, but I think I will, because that seems like it's in keeping. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. It's funny you mentioned them because I wrote my undergraduate honors thesis with them about the cultural impacts of raising the Shasta Dam. And I lived with them for a few years on and off. And they're like some of the most beautiful people I know. But again, like Molly's saying, this is an indigenous-led effort. It's the salmon run. And they're trying to restore the McCloud River salmon to the McCloud River, which is a major tributary of the Sacramento River in Northern California. And so what I would say, Molly, is go to one of their events. They have events all the time. They go to Sacramento and protest in front of the Capitol. They have movie screenings. They have the salmon run itself, where they actually run from San Francisco up to the headwaters in Mount Shasta. And I would say just one option that you have, because you have choice too, right? We all have choice. One option that you can choose is to go to one of these events and kind of once it's over, something to say, hey, what, if anything, can I do to help? And you can kind of list, these are some of the things I'm good at, but I can try and do other things too. And that's fun, because then you come humbly and it builds trust right off the bat, because you're asking them to lead you. So anyways, Sue Song, did you raise your hand? I'm seeing that you're saying it's not working for you.
She's having a hard time figuring it out, so maybe you can just unmute yourself, Sue.
I don't see where you can raise your hand. Where is that?
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Okay, well, Sue can share maybe
I went
first.
to participants and it's not giving me a different, it's not giving me a menu.
That's okay, we can skip that part and you can just share.
That's okay. I'm just saying that I'm loving what I'm hearing, and I would give a thumbs up, but I just don't have that ability to do it. So thank you so much, Lyla.
You're welcome. And Elaine, it looks like you might have something to say.
I had a question regarding the Shume land tax. I live in Santa Cruz County, which is south of a Bay Area a little bit, and we are in a Ohlone land. But when you showed the site of the Shume land tax, it didn't seem to include the South Bay. Do you know if there is something similar for that part of the, because we are definitely on Ohlone land here in Santa Cruz County.
Yeah. So the Shume land tax covers only the East Bay, unfortunately, because that's where the organizers are based. However, there's a couple routes you could take. Is you could approach the nation that you're living on and say, hey, is there a way I know you don't have like a proper tax set up the way they do in the East Bay, but is there a way I could honor you? Or even you can, I mean, that area has no shortage of web developers and fancy Silicon Valley people. Maybe you could recruit one of your web developer friends to offer to create a similar land tax for that nation. And again, it's only an offer, right? You don't come in saying, oh, this is what you should do, but you kind of come in saying, this is what they're doing in the East Bay. Would you like any help doing this here? I have web developers. That's a big project, obviously. That's a big undertaking, but it's possible. But if you would like to pay land tax in your area, you could probably find a local Indigenous leader and say, hey, I'd like to donate to one of your causes, whatever that may be, and kind of do it that way. That's unfortunately the best advice I could give you as of now.
Thank
Lyla,
you.
somebody put in the chat here that Elaine could learn about the Ama Mutsun Land Trust and support them.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I don't know if you're near Santa Cruz, but the Ama Mutsun Land Trust is a Santa Cruz area, and they're fighting a gravel mine in their homeland. And they're led by Val Lopez, who is also just an outstanding individual. He brings me to tears every time I hear him talk. So I don't know if you're in that area. I don't know where the Cross County is, but Santa Cruz has a really good stuff going on over there too. Here are some best practices that I've come up with just to help people kind of see the issue the way that not all, but a lot of Indigenous people see the issue. And to give you some tips and pointers. And let me share my screen. There we go. And John, if you could mute yourself, pretty please. All right, so if you can see my screen, you'll see best practices here. These are just some ideas that I came up with just to give you like a heads up. It's like if your friend is going to a party and you're like, oh, by the way, don't say that or don't say this. So I'm just trying to help you guys out here just to help you build trust, because Native communities have been harmed so deeply that we are very quick to write people off. We're very quick to label someone as they don't get it, or we're very quick to label someone as they're not safe, or very quick to label someone as like, I don't want to deal with that person. So I would like to help you guys to the best of my ability to just not run into those hangups so that you can actually exercise your help and what you would like to do. And you can actually make some headway with these communities. Kind of like this training. If I avoid certain terms, I avoid getting written off by certain people. So I have to say accomplices and allies, because there's a whole community that says allies is a bad word. So like little terms like that can actually just prevent snags from coming up. Okay, so if you want to sound really cool, and whoever's not muted, like there's like really cute little laughs going on from someone, but just to mute yourself, that would be great. Okay, so if you want to sound really cool, oops, sorry, I was use the term Indigenous peoples. Okay, so instead of using the word Indians, or Native Americans use the term indigenous peoples. Indians, like me as a native, I can say Indian, but you can't say Indian. Don't ask me why, it's just the way it is. I can call myself an Indian, but you can't. It's kind of like a weird thing. That's not universal, but there's a lot of usually older native people that they only call themselves Indians. And that's sort of like we're learning to call ourselves by the way that the colonizer called us. And we're just kind of normalize it, and it's kind of sanitary. It's made into like a positive thing. But more and more with the younger generation coming in, we're moving away from the word Indian and into the word indigenous peoples. Native Americans is a little better than Indian, but it also has that word America in it. And America comes from Amerigo Vespucci, who was commissioned to look for slaves and gold. We call him an explorer, but I think he's more of a pirate. So to call me a Native American, I'm still being named after this guy who was looking for slaves and gold. So etymologically, Native American is still not quite what we're looking for. Indigenous comes from the Latin root indina, which means intestines. And my mentor and graduate advisor, Dr. Cajete, says that indigenous is kind of metaphorical and beautiful because you're saying we are so much of the land that we are like the guts of the land. We're like, we are the guts of the land. So if you want to sound really cool, try and use indigenous peoples from now on. Follow and listen. Try not, sorry, this is a typo, to assume or commandeer or feel superior or smarter. Doesn't matter how many degrees you have, doesn't matter what kind of business you've ran or how many books you've read. When you enter the Native community, try and put that stuff at the door, because they have a lived experience. And although they might not have degrees from universities, although a lot of times they do have a incredible understanding of their own situation, their own issues, because they live it, they eat, sleep, and breathe it day in and day out. And they know colonization in the marrow of their bones. So try to be humble when you come to the community. And try to avoid acting superior, even though you may think you are. And I think we all fall victim to that sometimes, so I'm not judging people who fall victim to that. Learn the true name of the land you're standing on and the true name of the people who took care of it and take care of it still. This is another one of those things where you can get points and you can look cool. Because instead of calling it America, you can come in and say, this is Turtle Island. And the native people in the room will be like, okay, they know what Turtle Island is, that's good. And you get like a little point there. Turtle Island comes from an Anishinaabe creation story. The Anishinaabe are indigenous to the Great Lakes region as of now. They're also called Chippewa and Ojibwe, but their autonym, the name they have for themselves, is Anishinaabe. So Sky Woman fell from the sky, landed on a turtle's back, and she got all the ocean animals to get her a little clump of dirt from the bottom of the ocean. And it was the muskrat who brought the dirt up, the most humble and smallest creature. He was the one who went down. He's the one who agreed. All the ocean animals wouldn't, but he agreed to go down and get the dirt. And he actually died. He rose up dead with a clump of dirt in his little muskrat hand, and he gave it to Sky Woman. Sky Woman used that dirt to create land around the turtle's back. and she created the earth. So that's why we prefer Turtle Island to America. So we are on Turtle Island, you know, and even though I'm not Anishinaabe, I still prefer Turtle Island because it's sort of like it's something that a lot of indigenous peoples kind of look to. We kind of look to the Anishinaabe as like a placeholder for our perspective, because we all have creation stories. They almost always involve a female leader, and they almost always venerate the most humble beings, the most smallest and meek and brave beings. So Turtle Island. I'm now sitting in Albuquerque, New Mexico. What is the real name of Albuquerque? I live in a mixture of places. We have Isleta Pueblo, Santa Clara Pueblo. We have Santa Ana. Oh, not Santa Clara. Santa Ana, Isleta, and Sandia. So I'm even breaking my own rule now because their real name isn't Sandia. That's like a Spanish word, and their real name isn't Santa Ana. So if I was following my own advice, I would hop on Google, try and search, what is the real name of Santa Ana Pueblo? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. A lot of our knowledge is not on Google. So then I go to the community if I get an opportunity and say, hey, I just want to honor the real name of this land. Like, how do you say Santa Ana Pueblo? But I do know as a Dene person, we have a large area that we lived in, and we called it Denetra. So when I talk about New Mexico, when I talk about Arizona, when I talk about Utah and Colorado, these are all imaginary nation states. I say, you know, what is now called New Mexico, but we call Denetra. The word Dene is our autonym. It means the people. A lot of indigenous tribes you come across, that's the name they have for themselves. If you translate it, is the people. The Winnemem Wintu that Molly mentioned, Wintu means people. Winnemem means Middle River, so they're the Middle River people. So the world calls my tribe the Navajos. That's not what we call ourselves. So try if you can to learn, what do the people call themselves? In California, there's the WAPO, right? W-A-P-O or W-A-P-P-O. But that's not their real name. They're the Onatsatis, which means the outspoken people. Guapo comes from the Spanish word guapo, which means handsome, because when the Spanish came, they thought they were very comely. So learn the autonym of the people and refer to them as that is a best practice. Okay, moving on. Sorry, I took a long time on that bullet point. And I hope you guys aren't getting tired. I know we're on this call for a while, but thank you for bearing with me. Okay, another best practice. Try not to romanticize indigenous culture and people. What do I mean by this? Let me Google what I mean by this. Okay, let's do a quick Google search of Native American. And let's see what images come up. Let's see. Oh, don't do this. Don't wear the headdress and the makeup and the sexy outfit. That's a big no-no. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, this happens a lot too. On the right, there's a really handsome, over-sexualized picture of a Native American man. That's disrespectful. It's objectifying. Same with Native American women. That's kind of a version of romanticizing. Okay, let me, there's a certain thing I want to show you guys. If I Google Native American postcard, sometimes there's these postcards that are so funny. Where is it? Okay, let me try painting. There we go. So some of these are kind of like romanticizations that I don't think are like necessarily bad. They're just people admiring Native culture. But for a lot of Native Americans, it's kind of a turnoff. So usually if you do like them, don't like it in public at the Native American meeting or anything, because that's another thing that can kind of turn people off. Gosh, I'm trying to find the right one. It's usually like a picture of a woman and like a Native man like playing a flute for her. This one's a little bit like I'm talking about. It's sort of like a romanticization of Native people that is usually just not quite accurate. So that's one idea that I have for you guys. Try not to generalize. Each tribe is different, and even within tribes, there's many unique perspectives. There's, I believe, over 200 federally recognized tribes. I could be wrong, maybe it's 500, but it's in the hundreds. There's lots of federally recognized tribes. A lot of them are not recognized. So there's even that many more nations out there who the government just said, oh, you're not Indian. And they usually say that to disenfranchise them and dispossess them and disempower them. So you're talking hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of communities. And those are just the 2% that survived the genocide, right? So the 98% of our communities were decimated. So you imagine today we have 200 recognized tribes, and that's only 2% of what was here. And you have a lot of diversity of tribes that were here before the onslaught came along. So my point is that there's a big diversity of tribes. Try not to say Native Americans are this or Native Americans are that. And I know I'm kind of borderline doing that in this training, but my hope is to actually show you that there is no one size fits all. Everyone is a unique case. Okay, this one's, I'm trying to say with as much love and patience and just care as I can, but I know it's very tempting to do this because you're trying to establish your credibility within the community, but it's usually a turnoff. Try not to brag about the Native friends you have or the things you think you know about Native culture. Humility is the most sought after virtue in Native communities. Again, I'm not judging people who do this. I'm not saying you're bad or anything. I'm just that friend who's like, when you go to the party, don't do this, because even though we think we're doing the right thing, usually the community sometimes is like, oh, how do I, usually if you spend enough time in Native communities, like on a daily basis or a monthly, and like really, really dig in for years at a time, you'll start to see that the Native friends you have and the things you think about Native culture are a minuscule fraction of all the things you can actually learn about Native culture. So usually people do that to kind of show how much they know, but it backfires on them and it kind of reveals to those around them how much they don't know. So again, no judgment. It's all good if we've done this, but I'm just saying from a Native perspective, that's usually something to not do. Be patient, keep showing up and know that trust takes time to build, months and sometimes years. And there are varying degrees of trust within communities. The Lakota Nation, for example, will take in anybody to their Sundance, usually, not always, but usually, into their sweat lodges, because they have this principle called Mitako Oyasi, which means we're all relatives. So their ancestors really encouraged them to be open to everyone, even people who seem ignorant, even people who are Black, white, Asian, Australian, whoever they are. Even if they're not respectful, our task is to be respectful to them. So always be kind. You know, that's what some of our ancestors taught us, be kind. So they open their doors wide to anyone. They ask that their songs never be recorded, never be bought and sold, never be commercialized. But they are very open-hearted and very open-armed. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side is other communities that have been so hurt by outsiders, so profoundly just messed with, dispossessed, murdered, massacred, just their crops burned to the ground, that trust is just not there. And even though maybe it would behoove them to love in the face of that hatred, you really can't blame them that they're not able to do that right now, because they're still healing. And the pain that was inflicted on them was so immense, so deep, that they're just not going to open up to you. And you know what? At that point, you just pray for them from afar, and that's maybe the most they're going to let you do for them. And that's okay. You know, that's their choice, and we honor that choice. I know one indigenous community that I won't mention the exact name of the tribe, but when I was young, I started learning their language very fast because I was in their BIA school, Bureau of Indian Affairs, you know, government school that was. And I learned their language so fast as a Dene person. I wasn't part of their tribe specifically, that they actually took me out of the class because they didn't want even me to know too much about their tribe. They didn't want even me to be too close to them. So that exists out there. And if you come across that, that's okay. You can help a different tribe elsewhere. So yeah, be patient, keep showing up, and know that trust takes time to build. And it's always going to be a learning experience for you and them. So even if you quote unquote fail, at least you learned something and they learned something, and you're going to be able to do it next time, do it better next time. And kudos to those of you who try, even if you don't have this training. You know, it's the intention to help is a beautiful intention. Okay, almost done. We're about halfway through. Remember that hurt people hurt people. If you see dysfunction in Native communities, remember where it comes from. Problematize colonization and not the people who were annihilated by it. What do I mean by that? You might go into community and you see a Native guy beating up his wife, or you see a Native woman beating up her husband. And you think to yourself, wow, this doesn't look like the postcard I saw on Google. And try to refrain from judging them, because the only reason they're in that state of domestic violence, sometimes alcoholism, sometimes meth. I've done meth. I used to be on meth, you know, is because of the 500 years of absolute terror that is inflicted on their communities. 98% of their people disappearing overnight. We are a traumatized people. We got issues, you know, but it's not our fault. And many of us are doing what we can to heal from it, but it's hard. It's very hard when you're born into, you know, they used to import alcohol into our communities by the barrel and make us sign treaties when we were drunk. 9,000 of my people were put in a concentration camp right down the road from where I'm sitting right now. We were held there for 4 years. Thousands of us died in that concentration camp. Our women were systematically raped in that concentration camp. The men had to sit by and watch because they were held at gunpoint. So my nation, even though that was 150 years ago, we're still recovering from that. We're still bouncing back. So if you see Indigenous peoples do like things that are dysfunctional, remember to problematize colonization and not the people who are annihilated by it. And interestingly, I think this can be transferred to European Americans. I think a lot of us Native people say, oh, you know, that white person did this and that white person did that. And oh, can you believe Trump? What a dummy. And he's so mean and awful. And it's like, yes, he is doing very awful behavior, but where did that come from? And that's when we get into other stuff, the stuff that White Awake does, which is learning about the colonization of indigenous European tribes. And so even the behavior of white people, I try not to problematize them. I try to problematize the immense trauma that they don't even know that they have to heal. Sometimes those things are buried so far back, we don't even know what we're trying to heal. So anyways, that's my little spiel on that. People might disagree with me, but for what it's worth. Almost done here. Okay, thank you for hanging on with me. I know this is a long part. Native communities often want to see if you are humble, willing to learn, listen more than you speak, and are helpful. Humility is the ultimate virtue. So when you come in, try to listen more than you speak. Try not to be a know-it-all, because the chances are you don't know it all. Listen, observe, take your time getting to learn things. Maybe instead of asking hundreds of questions, maybe just let the questions be answered for you as you immerse yourself in the experience. Be a little bit observant, a little bit quiet, because Native people have had their voices shut down so many times that we're really sensitive to people who kind of come in with a lot to say. Probably more sensitive than most ethnic groups. We're very sensitive to that. We like people to kind of give us a chance to exist, give us a chance to breathe, give us a chance to speak, give us a chance to make mistakes, let us lead the project, and just kind of, you know, stand behind us. Okay. Be confident. You know, being humble doesn't mean you're less than Indigenous peoples. And I find some people take it to the opposite extreme, where they come so humble and so almost like subservient. But I think Indigenous peoples in general kind of respect European Americans who come in kind of knowing themselves and kind of knowing that they're worthy to help, and knowing that they're just being centered in themselves. You know, it's hard to find that balance of not being too arrogant, but also being confident, not being too subservient, but also being humble. But try and strike that balance of humility and confidence and self-confidence at the same time. It's a little hard to strike, but finally, know thyself. Know that your ancestors were beautiful before they were slaughtered by the Romans or other conquerors, before the witch hunts, before the bloodshed. Tap into your beautiful ancient Indigenous European roots and know that you are beautiful and worthy. Yes, work to reverse racism and colonization, but in my opinion, don't fall for the trick that you are quote unquote bad. You are not bad. You are also a product of colonization that occurred in Europe. Problematize that and not yourself. So know thyself and love thyself. And a lot of my Native contemporaries may disagree with me on this one. I'm just going to put this out there. But even if Native people are guilt tripping you or shaming you, I would say personally, don't go for that bait. Even hold true. You don't have to talk back at them or prove yourself to them, but just know inside of yourself, like, they're not being their highest self right now. They're not really understanding the depth of the tragedies of the cycles of violence that gave, you know, just love yourself, even if people are telling you you don't deserve to love yourself, and know thyself, even in the face of that. And that's very hard in Turtle Island, because I think when you're born as a European American with even some slight consciousness that, you know, justice is important, it often comes along with a lot of guilt and a lot of shame of being native, of being European descent, and knowing that your ancestors massacred and enslaved and da 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 da. But try not to fall for that pitfall, in my opinion, of self-loathing and guilt, because guilt is not from Creator, and it doesn't help anyone. Okay, I'm gonna pause there. I've been talking for way too long. We have about 30 minutes left in the training. Those are my ideas. Oh, one last thing that I forgot to put here. Act local. So for instance, there's a lot of tribes like the Lakota, right? They're very well known. They got the cool headdress. You know, that's partly due to the fact that they're so generous with their teachings and generous with their knowledge that they're very well known. And sometimes people focus on that and they forget about the little tribes, the local tribes. For instance, the Ramapo Lenape, who tiny little tribe. A lot of them don't even look native, right? They look like they're black or they look like they're white, but this is what's left of the Ramapo Lenape, and they have the beautiful courage and the beautiful wisdom to carry their ancestors' message forward. So if you're from New Jersey, yes, the Lakota look very cool. It's what you know about, but try and research what's in your backyard, like the Lenape. Washington, D.C. I think a lot of people think that Washington, D.C. has no more indigenous peoples. They're all gone. Piscataway Nation, which I apologize, probably isn't the right term for them. That's probably the anglicized term. Piscataway Nation is right there, and they're still struggling. They're still just barely making it by because they've had everything they own stripped away from them numerous times. There are indigenous peoples of Washington, D.C. Don't think that there's nobody in your backyard that you're quote unquote accountable to. You have a lot of local issues to serve, and wherever you're standing, according to our protocols and all that, is kind of who you're accountable to. As a Dene woman, one of my elders, Dr. Larry Emerson, brilliant Dene man, he said, Lyla, in our traditional way, whenever we left the four sacred mountains, we would follow the ceremonies and the leadership of that local tribe. If we go to the McCloud River, we're following the Winnemem Wintu. If we go to the Chesapeake Bay, we're following the Piscataway Nation. If we go to El Paso, we're following the Lipa and Apache. You know, wherever we go, if it's outside of our domain, we're gonna honor them because they speak the language of that land. He said, Dene Bezad, our language, that's the sound of the desert speaking through us. Our language wasn't invented by us. It's actually the earth speaking through us. And it's the language of the desert. Say I go to coastal Salish territory. I don't know anything about salmon. I'm a desert native, you know. How am I gonna tell them what to do about salmon, you know? They're the experts of the salmon. So we fall in line behind them. So wherever you are, try to get permission from the local peoples for things. Even if you're going to run a conference in wherever, it's a really good idea to consult with the local tribe and say, hey, I would like to run this conference here. Would that be okay? Do I have permission to do this in your homeland? And they might say no. So you run there. It's a very courageous thing to be really open and willing to whatever they say as the leaders of that area. So acting local, I get invited to a lot of places around the country to speak and to perform. I'm not always like able to do this 100% of the time because I can just barely do my own laundry sometimes, but I try to ask the indigenous peoples of that region, hey, Millersville University invited me to speak here, but I need to get your permission first. You know, is it okay if I come and do this? And if I do, is there anything you'd like me to say? Any message you'd like me to give? Any cause you'd like me to amplify? Anything, whatever you want. Is there any way I can use this opportunity to lend my everything to your voice? And you know, that's even as a Native American, even as an indigenous woman, I even do that wherever I go, because I'm not Penobscot, I'm not Anishinaabe, I'm not Maiamia, I'm not these nations. So when I go to another nation's homeland, I say, hey, is it okay if I come? If I do, is there anything I can do to serve you? And that's really fun, actually. I have a lot of fun doing it. I don't feel like I'm losing out or I'm losing power. I feel like I just get more and more networks, more and more connections. I build more and more friends. I get more and more trust. And more and more ability to do things in a right way. It makes me feel like I gain a little bit of honor each time, and that feels good to me. So even though I am a recovering control freak, I'm learning more and more to let go of what I want to see and what I want to see happen, and fall in line behind the visions of the people who are local. So that's our mantra today. In what way, if at all, can I help? So, all right, let's open it up to a couple comments. Maybe we'll spend the next 10 minutes just seeing what people want to say. Again, what you want to do is, sorry, let me stop sharing this screen. You say, you go to manage participants on the bottom, and then in theory, there should be a way to raise your hand. And if not, you know, just go ahead and unmute yourself. All right, Nancy, I want to do, yeah.
We had several people raise their hand or put questions in the chat last time. Do you want to address any of them or start from scratch here?
I don't know.
I saved a couple to the side, and maybe would you mind addressing a question that was put in the chat by Eric Garza?
Yeah.
A couple of people wanted to hear the answer to it. So
Let's do it.
He said, I am mixed race, part Native, part European, but I'm typically perceived as white. I also host a podcast and invite Indigenous people on, including you, and you're scheduled to record with him at the end of January. So his question is, how can I continue inviting non-white people without tokenizing them?
This brings up a really important topic that I was wanting to touch on, but I didn't know if I had time. There's two different topics here. One is, I'll do the actual question you're asking first. And the other one is like, what if you are part Native, but you don't look like it? That's a huge discussion. That's very controversial, but I would love to give my 2 cents on it. Okay, but your first question is, how do I invite more Native people without tokenizing them? I think tokenizing only happens when you're co-opting Native people to fit your vision. I could be wrong on that one, but I think as long as you're asking them, what do you want to talk about? That's giving them the stage, so to speak. It's giving them the mic. It's giving them a voice. So I know that when you and I talked, you wanted to talk about a specific thing, and I was down for that. people do that. They want to do podcasts with me and they want to talk about this. And I'm like, okay, sure. Because I love talking, as you might see, but I'll talk about just about anything. But maybe what people could do, instead of saying, hey, I want to take this person's energy and put it in service to my vision, my question, maybe what you could do is first say, like, what would you like to talk about on this podcast? And that doesn't mean you can't talk about what you want to talk about at all. You can still fit it in maybe in the second half of the interview, or the second third, or the last third, or the last quarter of the interview. But making sure they get a chance to, again, maybe they need diapers for their community. Maybe it's not this romantic, glamorous conversation topic that you think. Maybe they want to hear about, oh my God, Marielle is on, and Bianca. Hi guys, that's my old boss. So that's what I would say, Eric. And then the thing about being part Native, I'm of the mind that if you have a great grandma who's Cherokee, honor her. She's part of the reason you're standing. And the day we stop honoring those ancestors and claiming them is the day that the genocide is complete. Other natives will say, oh, that's one of those people who's just a 16th Cherokee, and they kind of belittle it, and you'll see that. And if you want to do that, that's cool. I'm just saying that's not what my elders trained me to do, because we have kids who are half white, half Japanese, half black, and we're not going to disown that kid. You know, they have indigenous blood in them, and like the Ramapo, some of the only Ramapos left all look African American. Are we going to say, oh, well, you're not Indian enough, you don't look Indian? So, however, I think one thing I will say about that is, say you have a quarter Mohawk in you, but you grew up in San Diego, California, in a really nice mansion. I think it is important to note that even though you are Mohawk, you might not have the experiences that people who were born into that war zone have. And therefore, you might want to give them a lot of leadership in your work for your own nation. And you might have privilege that they don't have. Like me, I'm Dene on my mom's side, 100%. On my dad's, there's a lot of European, so I kind of look a little European. I have privilege because of that in some spaces. In other spaces, you actually are more preferred the more Native you look. So it's contextual. But acknowledge that what I would say is, like, honor those ancestors. Even if there's Native people out there who are full-blooded and saying, oh, you're not really Native, you're just a 16th Cherokee. Just know that Lyla has your back and she's behind you, and she's saying, you know, it's okay to honor those ancestors and believe in them and learn about them, learn the language, learn what you can and live it. The best way we can honor our ancestors is how we live our lives on a daily basis. So if you live in a prayerful way, if you live in a generous way, if you live in a humble way, that's the biggest way you can honor those ancestors. And I would say honor them, because that's what they're about. Okay, we have a lot of people who want to talk. Let's see. Okay, Marielle, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask you to go deeper into that when you were talking about do's and don'ts, about setting, are you setting the vision and having Native people just fit into it, or are you following Native or Indigenous peoples?
Right.
And I'd like to explore that more. I'd love to hear from you, because when I grew up, like in the movement, it was, well, you serve the needs of people of color. Right now we're talking about Indigenous people, but my sort of growing up was around African Americans mostly, in like the movement part. And yet then when I came to New Mexico, I sort of practiced that. And then a really dear friend who you know, but will remain unnamed, said to me, you know, you're just following whatever I say is racist. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to be my partner, and I want you to help in the way that, like, when you see something, talk to me about it, and so that we can work together. And so anyway, what I wanted you to do was really see if you could go deeper than just sort of like do and don't, but explore that for all of us. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it is different in Native communities versus Afro-American communities because of how, well, I was going to say because of how our self-determination has been so thoroughly stripped. And I guess you could say the same for Afro-Americans, but they still kind of are able to do that, like, no, I won't go into that. But I think Native communities, it's like if you poke someone in one spot like 500 times, that spot gets really tender. So I think I'm trying to point out that that's a space to be careful about, of kind of coming in. And I think another thing I want to say is that following Indigenous leadership, I think, should be maybe like 60% of what we do in our daily lives. That's just a random number, but you know, like, but that's not all we should do. I think as Native people, we would be better people if we say, also pursue your visions and your dreams. So when I say follow Indigenous leadership, that's kind of when you're actually deliberately trying to uplift Indigenous communities. Maybe you have other stuff going on that doesn't really pertain to that specific objective or goal. And I think you should be able to do that. It's sort of like if you're a painter, but Native people want construction work. It's not that we're telling you to stop painting. Like, keep painting. But when we're building something with our construction work, the way you walk onto the job site is a specific way. That doesn't mean you have to stop painting and doing your own visions and your own dreams. It just means when we're engaged in the work of building solidarity, these are best practices. Does that kind of help? I don't know. Yeah, okay. I think also, I see what you're saying about your friend who said, don't just follow me and be my dog, you know. I don't think I'm saying that either. I'm saying for the Native context, we've had such little voice and agency and decision-making power for so long. My friend described colonization like this. She said, say you have a house and someone walks in and says, this is my house now, but you can live in the closet, but you're gonna have to pay rent to live in the closet in your own house. And by the way, I'm gonna put my trash in the closet. That's gonna be where my trash goes, but you can live there. So it's like, Afro-Americans don't necessarily have that experience. They have a whole nother tragic, crazy experience. But when your own house has been completely overtaken and the people who came did not come as guests at all, that's a sore spot where you would love it if someone comes into your house and says, hey, do I take off my shoes first, or is it okay to keep my shoes on? Hey, I brought some whatever for dinner tonight. You know, there's more of a, you approach it as a guest, not as a servant or as a dog or anything like that, but just a mindfulness that you're in someone else's home. And there's so few of us now, right? Like 98% of us got annihilated. So it's almost like Well, there's just a few of them. They don't matter that much, but I would say it's almost like an endangered species. The fewer they are doesn't mean they're less important. It means they're more important. It's more of an endangered thread in the tapestry of human culture, of human heritage, that really needs to be uplifted a lot more than, say, the pigeon, which there's many pigeons, but there's only a few blue-cheeked butterfly fish, and they only live in the Red Sea. So those guys, let's just definitely give them what they need. But thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a really important point. Okay, we only have 10 minutes left. I'm really, really sorry, but I think we only have time for one more. And then I just want to do some closing comments. So let's go with DL. Okay, you're on, DL. We can't hear you, or at least I can't.
That's Deborah.
Deborah, my bad.
It's okay.
Sorry.
She just might not know she's being called on. Deborah, are you there?
Okay, let's go to Galen Riggenbach. Go ahead.
Hi, Lyla. Yes, it is Galen, and I wanted to say thank you very much. It's been very enlightening and empowering. I'm guessing there are probably a few of us who've crossed the line and acted under the guise of savior faux pas in an innocent way, you know, maybe thinking we can help and just having an idea. So I know that I have, and I'm just wondering, what are some ways you think we can make amends to our Indigenous friends that we may have offended, even if it's by accident?
Yeah. It's a good question, and thanks for bringing that up. Well, I'm of the mind that the best apology is not spoken but acted. That's why in Canada they're kind of lacking, because they have this whole reconciliation effort, which has generated a lot of criticism. Even though it's beautiful, it's a lot farther than America ever got. At least Canada is saying sorry. America didn't even say sorry yet, but Canada has like a national apology, and they're trying to do this reconciliation work, and it's beautiful, but they've only done half the battle. It's one thing to say sorry, but it's another thing to apologize through our actions. So one thing you could do, and hopefully they're forgiving friends, sometimes they're not, and that's just how it is, but you can say, hey, I went through this training, and they told me that it's ideal to not come in with preconceived ideas, and it's actually better to kind of ask the community, what can I help with? And then you can say, so I realized I didn't do that in the past. I want to apologize for that. And I want to say, if you need any help at all, I'd love to help on your terms. I'd love to help in ways that you need. And
That's right.
yeah.
I like it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. So let's go ahead and close out. Man, where did that go? Okay, let's go back to our little sheet. Ah, shoot. Darn.
Lyla, do you think you have one more time for a short question from the chat?
Sure.
Comes from Molly Brown. She says, please give us your thoughts and feelings about the use of the term decolonizing outside of land restoration.
Huh. Okay, this is just Lila's opinion, okay? Because I know there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions on this word. Sorry, one sec. There we go. I would say that I wrote a short essay about this. Maybe I should share it with you guys. But decolonizing, to me, is sort of precarious, because you're still relating yourself to colonization. Sort of an inverse of that is indigenization. For instance, decolonizing, maybe there's a Walmart in your community and it's a total colonial structure and you just hate it so bad. To decolonize it, you would have to strip that Walmart down one layer at a time and destroy it. You're still, all of your actions are relative to that Walmart. So even though you're fighting it, you're kind of really engaged with it. And I know there's lots of conversations we could have about that. Indigenization is like, oh, my nation used to eat deer, corn, beans, and squash. Now we're eating Slurpees, Egg McMuffins, and Dr. Pepper. I'm gonna bring these foods back. So you're indigenizing the foods. And then what you're doing is you're planting the beans, you're planting the squash, you're planting the corn. You're fighting to create more deer habitat. You're loosening the hunting restrictions that the colonial state has imposed on your people. Then your life is revolving around the deer, the beans, and the squash. And I know we don't always have the luxury of not fighting Walmart. I know a lot of tribes are held hostage and like, it's either fight Walmart or die. So sometimes that's a luxury. However, I think that's one thing I would say is like decolonization, sometimes you give so much energy to the colony to strip it down, and you start to be defined by that struggle against the colony instead of defined by the action of coming back into your true self. I don't know what that means for non-Indigenous people. I just know that for me personally, that's been a struggle. I've kind of, and I do both, to be honest. I decolonize and indigenize. I think I spend more time indigenizing because I really want to know how these seeds work. I'm really interested in it. Maybe we can discuss that question a little more in depth of what that means from a European American perspective. But I know a lot of my Indigenous contemporaries, decolonization is their bread and butter. They love it. They eat, sleep, and breathe it, and more power to them. Makes them happy. Do it. For me, it doesn't fully satisfy something in me. I'm still not close to something that I want to be close to. So I have to do both, indigenize and decolonize. I love our languages. I'm tired of speaking English. It's an impoverished language. So if I spend all my time fighting the power plant, there will be no time to learn my language. So I have to create a balance between the two, or else I'll lose myself in the process of the fight. Okay, so we are now 3 minutes out. And I'm gonna share my little sheet here. This is something that I accidentally erased that I just wanna go over real quick. Sorry. There we are. So this part that I'm highlighting here says, what do we have to offer? Let's face it, as European Americans and myself, even as a Stanford graduate and part European woman, we have money that Native people just don't have. We were never trained to work in these environments, these Western environments. So that's one way we can help. Legal expertise, very helpful. A lot of times these tribes are trying to navigate a system that's totally bewildering. Journalism, that New York Times article about the Ramapo, like who did that? What white person decided that they were gonna write an article in the New York Times about the Lenape, a tribe that no one ever cares about or heard about, and all of a sudden Chief Perry's in the New York Times, you know? That's great. Art and design, maybe you do graphic design, maybe you, that's helpful. Volunteer hours and brunt work. Sometimes we just need someone to show up and move the chairs and sweep the building when we're done. Like that's very valuable. Construction knowledge, I just leveraged a few kind of European American spiritual groups to raise $50,000 for Oglala homes. And we've been renovating the windows of these homes, which over 400 homes were destroyed by a hailstorm and a tornado in February. So, you know, showing up with your skill saw. Who knew that could be so helpful? Web design, like I said, Lisa Heth, her website's down. So I wanted to ask people what else. Maybe we'll get to that on the next call. But we have a lot of resources to help. But again, offer them humbly. Don't come in and say, you know, your website looks really horrible, looks drab. Here, I have this training from Silicon Valley and I'm an expert in websites and I know what you need, and you need a website that's chic, user-friendly, blah, 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 and let's rattle. Try not to do that either. Instead say, hey, I have a lot of experience in web design. Do you need that? And they might say no. You say, okay. And if they say yes, you could say, okay, what do you want your website to look like? And then follow that vision. Okay. Homework. This is sort of an experiment, and hopefully I'm not sending you into some, but either way, you're going to learn whether you fail or succeed. So, but this is just options. You don't have to do this, obviously, but find an Indigenous leader in your community who is working for the people and ask them, in what ways, if at all, can I help? And then on the next call, we can report to each other how that went. Maybe it'll be a complete train wreck. Tell us about it. We'll all learn from it. Maybe it'll be really interesting. And you're like, you can share with us something you learned. Maybe you don't have any free time to help. That's okay. You don't have to do this homework piece. But if you have maybe an hour to donate to a tribe every week, just say, hey, I have an hour, or maybe you have 5 hours. What can I do? Another homework you could do is spend time researching the original names of the people that lived in your homeland. And like John Apple said, knowing that the history you read on Google and stuff is probably not completely accurate and is probably complete, but do the best you can. Okay, and then I'll just end. I know we're a minute past the hour, but you're all hanging on with me. Thanks for that. But White Awake used one of my essays for their anti-racism training and what they do for European Americans to train them to, they do a lot of beautiful work that I'm not fully keen on, but whiteawake.org has the full curriculum. So I was having a really hard time paying tuition for my PhD. So someone said, hey, well, Lyla, they're using your essay, you know, maybe ask them if they'd give you a little donation for your essay. So I said, okay. So I said, hey, I see you're using my essay. I wonder if you'd be up for remunerating me for that, even if it's just like $50, $100, you know, to help me a little bit. Wide Awake was super happy to help me. They gave me a donation for my tuition. It helped me. I think this was in just December or November. I was having a hard time. And then they said, and we'd like to feature you on a training, and then we'll give the proceeds to your project as well. So I wanted to be transparent about the proceeds of this training. Depending on how much we get from this training, these are just my priorities. But we're going to be, I'm engaged in my PhD is on traditional foods and language revitalization. So basically, I'm going to be interviewing 13 Native elders from around the world about traditional foods. That's like my pre-research. And again, asking them, what should I do? I'm asking them to lead the project, actually. And they're going to be paid $100 for interviews. These are mostly elderly women from different indigenous nations across the world. And others are 4 of them are going to be paid $1,000 for a longer participant observation trip. And that'll form the foundation of my dissertation, is my experience with these food practitioners. Tuition, paying Native co-researchers for their work in transcribing interviews. I've actually paid a young Native woman who has a baby and is living in a trailer and barely has the means to make ends meet, but she's very smart. She's been transcribing my interviews and I pay her $20 an hour. So that's another place that these funds are going to go to. And also I have a brother who has a child. He's a native. He's Turtle Mountain Chippewa. He's struggling to pay bills for his wife and daughter. And I'm going to have him do some of the design work for some of our findings to kind of put it out in the public in a way that's palatable. And lastly, if there's any money left, I'm not sure there will be, but I'm eventually going to be traveling to these 4 different Native foodway practitioners' homes and donating 200 hours of community service to them as part of my dissertation research. So that's going to be going on over the next year. So just to be completely transparent, that's where the proceeds of this training are going to. And I'm trying to share it with other Native people as much as possible, while at the same time just being able to cover some basic things. So we'll end there. I'm excited to see you guys next week. Thank you, Eleanor and Joe, for being the tech managers. Thank all of you for coming. I've never done this before. I'm sorry if I'm not very good at it, but I really love each of you, and I really believe that regardless of race, the intention and the spirit is what matters. And so thank you for having the intention to help and the intention to serve. And like our friend said, maybe you've made faux pas in the past, but I do appreciate your intention to help and your intention to be involved in Indigenous life, because Lord knows there's a lot of European Americans out there who completely content with just not even caring about Native people, pretending they don't exist, and just happily driving their Beamer and living in their whatever. So thank you for caring about our communities enough to take this training. It truly means a lot. And I appreciate all of your support and all of your attention. And we'll see you next week, and my prayers are with you.
Lyla, I want to point out you just got a flood of gratitude in the chat.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll try and take a look at what people said today.
And we'll make sure you have the chat, Lyla. We'll be preserving the chat, and we'll link it to the video so that people who weren't here can read what was in the chat, what was being shared, and the links that you shared, Lyla. And then, of course, you'll have access to it as well. So, and things we don't have time to look at right now before the meeting ends. Everyone should have access to. And I will point out the next training is in 2 weeks on the 28th, right? January 28th. And yeah, and then just
27th.
27th, thank you.
I was like, oh.
I'm like, wait, I don't have it in front of me. Yeah, and so, you know, we're a little bit over. Folks that need to go ahead and go. I just wanted to make a couple comments about registration and getting on Zoom. I know a lot of you guys got on a little bit late. It was hard to get your registration information. We've done workshops in different ways. Right now, where we are experimenting with being more careful about who we let on and how we let them on, because we do have a lot of folks on this call, and we want to make sure that everybody means well and signed up and is trying to be here for this, not something else. And so, you know, but I know that's extra steps to jump through to register for Zoom, as well as registering with us. Also, just a note that Wide Awake is small. I'm your primary registrant person. I'm trying to correspond with everyone who writes in. Please read all your materials carefully, and just hopefully, even if you're frustrated, you can be gracious, because I am doing my best to make sure that everybody's needs are met. And then I'll just say that I feel very thankful for this opportunity, for everyone that's shown up, everyone that's been able to donate money towards the work that Lyla just described. And it feels like this incredible win-win situation for everyone, because, you know, Wide Awake is able to facilitate you all connecting with Lyla and what Lyla has to share, and then also donate towards her work. And so I'm just really appreciative we can all come together and do this. One thing that we often do when we close is to go into gallery mode so we can all see one another and we can wave goodbye before we get off the meeting. So you're welcome to unmute yourself if you want to. And
how do you go into gallery mode?
Oh, go up to the top top right-hand side, you can click on it. It'll either say speaker view or gallery mode. And so when you're in speaker view, you see the person who's making the most noise in the big in the middle of your screen. And when you're in gallery view, you see lots of little tiles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, bye.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
That's not.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone.
Have a good day.
More to
Thank
do
you.
now.
Bye.
Look at that. I was looking. Oh, yeah. She was-
That's
Yeah.
Zoom. Yeah. Thanks, man. I like Zoom.
Huh.
So thank you all for coming.